Hello and welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Ourielle and I will be your host. I almost let April go by without making a video about autism, and I wasn't gonna let that happen. Okay, here I am on the internet. Before we get into it, I want to say that I am a local diagnosed autistic, not once, but twice by medical professionals. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how autism and knitting are like very intertwined for me, and also that I don't necessarily think it's just for me, but I haven't seen any other videos in my space. Yes, we are already reaching the end of Autism Awareness Month. This is not going to be a be-all end-all video about autism and like autism education. There are some awesome content creators and educators and science communicators and everything on the site, and also probably people in your actual life who can probably give you a more well-rounded, not even well-rounded, but like another glimpse into the world, because it is a spectrum and everyone's experience is different. And I, like, far be it from me, is that the phrase, far be it from me? I don't want to be the person to get up here and to prostrate myself in front of my judge, jury, and executioner of an audience and be like, yes, it is I, the autism representation girl. Because I have a lot of feelings about this myself, and it's a very vulnerable place to be in. And as much as I feel like it's important to get out and dispel a lot of myths and to have frank and candid, honest, vulnerable conversations, as much as the next person, it is like stressful and scary, and I don't want to get yelled at. And I also don't claim to be an expert, and also I have such a limited experience because I am one person and I have one lived experience, and like I don't know where my experience begins and the autism ends, right? Like, it is a part of me. It is the way that my brain developed, the way that my neural synapses are, you know, engineered. It's the way that I view the world. So there is no way for me to make it long and short and representative of everyone. And I went back and forth about this because I've been seeing a lot of the like, everyone just wants to claim autism these days. Everyone wants to be autistic these days. Before you comment that down below, which you probably won't, but before you do say that, I pose the question of like, do you have another online knitting content creator who is openly autistic and like talking about this kind of thing? Because like, great, then I can take this video down. I don't want to be that person. Or like, I can be a secondary voice. But as of right now, I tried to think about someone who could be there, not as like a proxy or, you know, even, again, I like social scripts. Like, I like knowing what to do. I like researching. Hello, I got that dog at me. So like, I wanted to prepare myself by like doing some research and seeing what other people have said. And lo and behold, I haven't really seen anything. So it is like, I don't in my mind doubt at all, but they're obviously neurodiverse. And again, neurodivergence is not just ADHD and autism. I know that's like the hot button topic of the year, but like, this is a diverse industry and there's a lot of us here. But I do think that this is one of those things where we keep it close to the chest, and I think that's totally fine. But when it comes to intersectionality and identity, you know, for those of us who are okay with sharing a little bit more about our personal lives, I think it could be helpful. So that's going to be my experience today. Let's talk a little bit about autism and knitting. The first thing that I want to say is that I do think the culture shows autistic traits even when people don't name it as autistic traits. And also when I say traits of autism, I don't mean to say that that's like only for autistic people. I just mean that like autism is, I don't know, what is it called? Like a constellation, right? It's like one of those things where you have like many, many, many different features. And those features tend to be found in higher proportions than average in certain groups of people. And like those people have diagnosis, right? It's like clusters. So you might like charts and you might like sensory seeking and you might like all the other fucking stuff that I mentioned in this video, and you may not score to qualify on the RADS test. Like, that's totally fine with me and you and like whatever. So I do want to make this distinction, but I do think there are a lot of traits endemic to knitting that make it really, really autism friendly. And that's why it was really, really compatible with me, and potentially why it's compatible with your little autistic daughter or kid or friend or neighbor or the undiagnosed guy down the street that like you're fairly sure is on the spectrum, but like whatever. And I think it's lovely and I think it's wonderful, and I wanted to celebrate it during this month. That was my holiday that no one really remembered or realized. And I do think that there probably is a little bit of an overrepresentation of us in these spaces. Generally, I will find that, you know, autistics, special interests, all that, we tend to be very passionate about the thing that we're in. So like in any given hobby, the person who is really passionate and has been for a really long time and also spends all their waking moments and free brain cells and everything that they could possibly divert towards their interest, showing up in that hobby and doing that hobby, like that's very autism coded behavior, right? To like be so thoroughly entrenched in your thing, because that's just the way that our brains work. So I'm not saying that this is like just a knitting thing, but I do think there are some components to knitting that I think make it particularly juicy and delicious and yummy for the autistic brain, because there's a lot to get into, and I'm going to get into those right now. Okay, this list is long. It has like a through line, but they're not necessarily in any particular order, so walk with me here, okay? Number one, I feel like this autism and knitting work together because knitting is a great long-term special interest container, okay? And what that means is I feel like it's very, very compatible to be a special interest. And a special interest is that thing that you're interested in for a very, very long extended period of time. But think about it as like the thing that you are really into, or that guy who's like really into trains. Really into trains, he's always been into trains. He was born out of the womb and he said choo-choo, like he knows every train by name, he knows the make and model, he knows the year that the thing came out, he knows where they were produced and when, and what kinds of people worked on the factories, and he can talk about it all day long, and probably has to spend a lot of energy like not talking about the thing that he's interested in all day long. Because if he had it his way, he would live in train world 24/7 and would literally not get bored of it, right? Knitting is a great vessel for that, and I think it can last you a very, very long time. And again, it could be like the most boring, niche, hyper-specific thing. It could be like the shape of mason jar lids, and the right person will take that and it'll be a hyperfixation for an entire lifetime, right? But I think knitting in general is a great container for all of these behaviors and this interest and this kind of, I don't want to say like circular thought pattern because it's not like the same thought every single day, but it's contained, right? It's the bubble of the genre of the thing that you're interested in. I think it works well as a special interest container because there's so much depth. There is a very, very long storied history. There is a political history. There is a gender history. There's a cultural, anthropological lens you could take to it. There's a material science lens you could take to it. You could study kind of like the vintage, you know, knitting styles where you're looking at old yarn constructions, materials, ways that people used to spin yarn that they don't do anymore, factories that were made in a certain way, companies that were in and out. Or you could really just be into the freaking patterns of it all, right? Like the actual intricacy of knitting itself, construction, fit, drape. You could also look at the fashion. You could look at design elements. You could look into kind of pushing the envelope forward in the future and like what are different material sciences doing? Like they're adding seaweed into yarn now, like all that kind of stuff. I know that because I have a special interest in knitting and I read this stuff in my free time. And on top of that, if you are crazy enough, you can also get into spinning. You can get into animal husbandry because now you're raising alpaca for the wool. It just goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think there are years and years of research study. It's like lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of material you could have that are not capped, really. It's not like a beginning and end. It's one of those things that, and this is true of everything in life, right? Everything in life is like infinitely studyable. What I want to say is like specialized enough that they don't feel like extremely mainstream and like surface level. And I think this is that like itch that some people get when they say like the youngsters are crocheting and the youngsters are knitting, and then there's always this pushback of like, oh, youngsters think they discovered everything. Everyone, like nothing is new. Everyone's been doing this for a long time, and now you want to come in and you want to water it down. Well, we don't want you guys, right? There are always going to be gatekeepers in a community because there's the idea that when something gets too mainstream, it gets watered down or commercialized, or maybe, I don't know, consumerism and private equity come in and ruin stuff. And I think those are valid arguments when substantiated in a specific way. And I think knitting is one of those hobbies that is kind of niche enough that we don't necessarily have that big industry kind of corpo slop stuff that waters down our space that much. Yes, I do think sometimes we do have big companies who try to take us for a ride, and there are definitely scams and there's drama, and just like any thing in life, there are bad actors. But I do think we are small enough a world that there's a lot of mutual trust, and there's a lot of like grassroots movements. Everything is kind of small. There's not a lot of like big companies that are like shaking up the space the way like tech is doing, you know, with other stuff. And so in that way, it also feels very special interest friendly because you're not dealing with a thing that is so big and so wide and so common that like everyone is in it, and a lot of actors are involved for perhaps underhanded reasons. I don't know how to phrase it besides like there's just not enough money in knitting to be in here for clout chasing, right? And I think that's also positive. Like if this is a positive niche where you sit, you're never going to be here for the wrong reasons. Like maybe you could be, but like realistically, it's kind of a small world, and it's a small world that is built off the backs of like individual community members. And like it seems like you can build a lot of knowledge just from like talking and like building up that, again, that pool of resources. And because those resources are kind of disparate and they're hard to find, and it's like a smallish world and you have to have access, blah, 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 I think that makes it a little bit juicier, a special interest compared to something like I don't know, soccer. Like everyone knows soccer. Soccer is really big and there's a lot to gain in soccer. Whereas for this, it seems like a slightly smaller niche, slightly more particular. You need to know a little bit who's who, and like you can get around, but like there's not so much money in it that like it might be watered down by the normies, right? So I think it's a particularly good Goldilocks spot in terms of special interests. Hi, I called this whole section sensory seeking, but really what it should be called is sensory seeking and sensory sensitivity. It's a long and short description about like wanting more or wanting less sensory input depending on your nervous system. I don't need to get into it. There are like lots of Google images you can use to like give yourself the quick and dirty lowdown, which I did not do before I started this. Anyway, this is to say, my bad. I meant it can be sensory seeking or it can be about relieving your sensory sensitivity, but senses is what I'm going to say. Number 2 is that I think it helps with sensory seeking. So sensory seeking is a behavior that autistics do. And when I talk about tactile hobbies, and I think the best way to describe this is that everyone is doing it now. Everyone is doing the sensory seek. Everyone is doing the unplug, ground yourself, get yourself an analog bag, build yourself some hobbies that are outside of the digital tech world because everything is so like from the head up. And we're so Aquarian and like nothing is real anymore, and we want to be more embodied, and we want to touch grass, and we want to be outside, and we want to feel something and remind ourselves that we are human beings. And that I think is a really good way to describe sensory seeking with autism. Or like when you come home and you want to take off all your outside clothes, you want to take your bra off and you want to change it to your comfy pajamas, that's sensory seeking. If you go to the gym and you want to sweat it out, and when you sweat everything out, it feels like your body has been scrubbed anew, that is sensory seeking. I feel like, yes, neurotypicals experience this because we do it, we're human beings, it's called like living in a world. But I think the degree to which this kind of need is essential is amplified, right, when you're neurodivergent, specifically when you have autism. And I'm going to potentially make that slip a couple times in this video. So if I say neurodivergent, what I really mean in this particular video is autistic. And what I really mean in this video is me, autistic. I'm not saying that this is everyone, right? It's very sensory friendly. It's beautiful for sensory seeking in the sense that yarns just feel good. You know this because you go to the yarn store and you just immediately want to touch everything. I'm going on the wool walk this week as we talk, and I'm just very excited to squish some wool. I don't have anything that I particularly want to buy, but I'm excited to do a road trip. I'm excited to touch stuff, to see stuff, to go to a yarn store. You know this if you've gone on vacation or you've traveled and you've looked into the stores and you see beautiful walls and beautiful decor, and it just makes you feel at peace. It's because that part of your body that is sense-oriented is highly attuned to those things, and you feel sensitive and you feel happy, or it does something to you. It's either calming or inspirational or invigorating, or just makes you bubbly and fizzy inside because the yarn just feels so incredibly soft, so luscious, so fun. And so I think knitting is a really great way to get some of that like positive stimulus seeking behavior in a way that like is accessible to me on a daily basis, right? Like it just feels like I have a lot of contact time with the senses that I like. A lot of things that I like looking at, a lot of things that I like touching, a lot of things that I like doing, and it feels good. But I do think that it helps that in knitting, you are kind of permitted to be fussy and as picky and annoying as you possibly want. There is a lot of compromising that has to be done in life, and it depends on how much you mask, and it depends on the kind of environment that you live in and the level of agency that you have, and privilege and all of that is included, right? But I think it's safe to say that us autistics are picky. That is literally part of the diagnosis. And I don't even mean picky in like a preferential, like I just have things that I want kind of way, but it is kind of like in the way that our brains are wired. We notice certain things and we cannot tolerate a lot of other things. And certain things are just going to be more important to us than they are to other people. And in life, oftentimes, if you are wanting to maintain a level of social lubrication, or you want to have harmony in certain ways with other people in life, you learn to make your preferences smaller. And again, this is true of not everyone. And so I really want to reiterate one more time, and I'm not going to keep doing it, that this is traits found in autism, and they're not exclusively found in autism, right? But when we spend a lot of our lives trying to make ourselves seem less picky than we actually are, because being picky is seen as negative, right? It can be frustrating, and it can be frustrating to feel like your wants and preferences for things are a burden on others. I'm not saying it's not true. It could very much so be a burden on others. And who does that hurt emotionally? All parties, right? But in knitting, it doesn't really matter that you're picky. Or like, to me, I feel like it's one of those worlds where like, it's fine for you to be picking when you knit, because if you don't like the thing that you knit, just rip it out and knit it again, or knit it in something else. Or like, ultimately the stakes are fairly low. But I do think when it comes to my knitting, I allow myself to be as picky as I want to be, and it doesn't make me feel bad. It's like my own hobby. I'm allowed to do what I want. I'm allowed to look for the right yarn over and over and over again until I find the one that I want. And if I don't find it, then like no one is at fault and no one is inconvenienced besides me. And I think that level of control and that kind of level of the dial being able to be tuned in as finely or as coarsely as I would like is a relief to me. To be able to have a level of precision and kind of pickiness that doesn't make me want to apologize to people all the time. It feels good. Okay, I apologize for the lighting shift. I stared into the sun because my blinds got stuck and now my eyes are like all crossed. So if I look very dazed and confused, that is why. Okay, the next thing that I have is that it is calming for the nervous system. We actually know this, again, already in general. So this is one of those things where like we understand that what is inclusive design can be like a tier 1 intervention, and it works for all people, including those who we are trying to serve, right? I think crafting is one of those examples where we understand that crafting is really fantastic for mental health. And there's something about the physical motion of crafting and the repetitive motion that your body can focus on that then allows your mind to regulate and your emotions to regulate and your body to calm down. I'm not going to be like explaining these points in a way like where I have my citations ready, but I will maybe try to find like a couple examples of this, but like surely you can Google a little bit more and like do some further reading and maybe look at some therapeutic research that is available here on YouTube. There's a lot of great accredited licensed therapists who talk about the importance of actual like somatic therapy, right? And how crafting is really good for the mind. If you craft, you already know this, so I don't want to like preach to the choir here, but it helps regulate the nervous system and calm the nervous system down, which for people who have autism, that's kind of like priority number 1 all the time, right? Is that like the nervous system is constantly dysregulated by the environment, because like we just like either we aren't built for the environment or the environment is built for us, right? But like there is some kind of mismatch happening where frequently you are in fight or flight mode. And again, this could be true of a lot of different people, but crafting is one of those things that really, really can help calm you down, help you clear your mind, or maybe you can think a little bit more clearly about the thing that you're trying to parse through, or maybe you can get your mind off of the thing that you're trying to parse through. And a lot of people have shared these stories with me in particular, not necessarily with autism, though I am getting quite a few messages from those of you guys who have autism and how it's really important for you guys to cope and stim, and that's fantastic, and I love hearing that. But I've also gotten many comments from people who said that they used knitting during their grief or during really, really difficult periods of depression and mental health, like whether it's postpartum or healing from an illness, during times of like heartbreak, which, you know, valid. And yeah, it is just important to have an outlet that physically holds you and cradles you and doesn't judge you, and it's like just a thing that you can rely on, and it's there all the time, and it's dependable, and it physically heals your body. As long as you are practicing safe knitting and you're not giving yourself like an injury from repetitive stress and all that stuff. But in the sense of the nervous system, it really is useful, and I use it very much so as a regulation tool. And I also want to say, specific to autism, that the repetitive motion and, you know, the physicality of it, it is socially acceptable stimming. I think we talk a little bit about stimming, and like, you know, if you're not familiar with what stimming is, it's just, you know, physical motions that you do to self-soothe. And, you know, whether or not it is fair, we live in a world where stimming can and is frequently judged depending on the kind that you're doing, right? So certain types of stimming are totally socially acceptable, you know, like playing with your little pen, or like, you know, if you have a little thing in your hair and you're like fidgeting with your hair, you're playing with a bracelet and it's like super subtle, like that's totally fine. More obvious forms of stimming, God forbid you have like a stimulation toy that's like stretchy or pulley, or you have a biting thing or whatever, that's going to get you a lot more looks. Now, I don't want to have the discussion about whether or not like that's appropriate for the world that we live in, but it is fair to say that knitting is a lot more socially acceptable. If you go to the dentist and you're nervous and you otherwise pick at your nails or bite your nails or pull out your hair, and you realize that if you can knit a sock instead, your hands are busy, your mind is busy, you're not like ruminating about the dentist, and no one is asking you questions because like now you're visibly anxious and all that. Now you understand the purpose of stimming, right? It is self-soothing behavior. And again, a lot of people freaking do it. And knitting for me has been a very, very wonderful, socially acceptable stimming behavior. But this is one of those things that I used to think was like so sly and so cool, where like I would take fiber arts with me to parties and social gatherings, and I would just like on my like little crochet blanket or whatever, and I would crochet or I would knit, and it helped me be present and be available and like emotionally able to engage at the level that was like comfortable for me at a social engagement, where otherwise I would be like high strung, stressed out, we need to be on something to self-medicate. Like it's just really hard to fully mask, not have anything to help stim. And especially if the thing that you're trying to stim with is not socially acceptable, it just immediately outs you, right? So knitting as a stim is helpful for people for so many different reasons, whether it is knitting to regulate, whether it's a stim or whether it's just to help your nervous system, or whether it's helping you relax or work through something, I think is so underrated, and not just for people who have autism, but also for a myriad of other reasons. But I think that's one that we already know, because crafting itself, being mindful and being grounded and being centered in the moment with a thing that you're doing to work towards a goal, is very much so supported by the literature. Okay, the next thing that I have is that it is practice for executive functioning skills, expectation management, and creates a controlled failure environment. Fancy words. So executive functioning skills. So that is a tricky one, and it's a tough subject for me because, yeah, you can be someone who like really prides himself on having executive excellence and also be really disordered at it, right? And that is kind of like the double bind that I'm in, where it's like, it's really important to me that I'm known as someone who is super responsible, on top of my shit in terms of having very complex tasks, remembering things long term, remembering things that are like abstracted in the distance with many different steps and very complicated patterns, all that stuff. And yet it is incredibly cognitively difficult. And knitting is one of those things where you can kind of practice those things. And again, like I said, the stakes are not that high, and the only person that gets in trouble is you, which is also why maybe gift knitting can be a whole different thing for other people depending on where you sit on the spectrum of liking or disliking gift knitting. But because I think knitting is a really executively demanding task, it can set you up to practice long-term skills. Things like budgets and timelines, and goal planning, and planning how you are going to break down a task into multiple smaller tasks, and where are you going to source your information from. What are you going to do if something falls through and like the thing that you wanted isn't available anymore, or the color's not available, or it's not being produced, or it doesn't fit your gauge, or you knit it and the pattern writing isn't the way that you expected it to be, or the fit is wrong. All of those things are points of contact for failure, and I do think those are important life skills to have, because again, emotional regulation and like whatever, insert blank here for self-improvement, that like was not possible to do until I had a special interest that like demanded it of me, right? So if I am out of commission because I overstrained my wrist muscles, because I ignored my bodily functions for 14 hours straight, and I knit through all the things that I was supposed to do, and then I caused a stress injury, and now I can't knit for 2 weeks, that is really painful. I learned my lesson, and now I'm going to go backwards and like actually have to put in timers and like built in executive function aids for me to get to that point. And I think that's actually nothing to sneeze at. Again, I'm really proud of like some of the skills that I've developed, especially around expectation management and containing some of those like big unuseful feelings. And I think that's the thing, where like people can have as many big fucking feelings as they want. There's like no problem with that. I think the problem is when they feel disproportionate to what you want to feel, or like what you feel like is appropriate to feel. I'm not saying we need to stifle ourselves. I'm not saying that like you shouldn't care a lot about your projects, but if it's getting to the point where like it's impacting other parts of your life and it feels inappropriate for you and like what you want to feel towards a thing, right? Or like it's causing disorder and other things, right? Like it's just disproportionate. Having that practice is actually really useful, and it's been a good eye-opener. And in many ways I'm like, it's knitting, it's not that serious, it's not that deep. And then I look at that kind of emotional progress that I've made, just being able to talk to myself, right? Being able to rationalize things, especially when I don't feel very rational in the moment. I feel like I've made a lot of progress, and I'm very proud of myself. And you know, that's just happened in the last couple of years. I've only been knitting for like 2 full years and a half now. That feels really good, and it feels nice to think about like what might happen in the future. Maybe other things will roll off my back the way they were before, or maybe perfectionism in all aspects to the point where it's like demanding and unreasonable will not continue to be a thing, because I've learned to let go in the smaller thing, in a playground, in a sandbox that like is small and contained, and I can practice that life skill and I can apply it to other things. Same with budgeting, same with compulsions and like really obsessive actions, you know, all of it. And the other piece that I want to mention, which is community-based, is that I'm also watching other people reckon with their mistakes, reckon with their failures, reckon with dramas that are like far bigger tragedies than I am facing. And obviously, like, you see that all the time. Like, people are dying, Kim, you know? Like, I understand. We always see people suffering, and it should help us build a mental framework of empathy and of regulating, but sometimes it's not personal enough or it's not specific enough to the thing, and we don't have just the like fundamental physical understanding. But when it is something close enough to home, we can understand it, right? So if you tell me you knit your extra 2XL large partner a 3-stranded fingering weight colorwork sweater, and then they put it in the wash and dry, and it immediately felted, and they barely even got to wear it once, and you spent a whole year making that, and now they make nothing, I am feeling a level of empathy and just like fear in my body that is very visceral. And if you can talk about that experience and kind of do it in a way that feels proportionate to the experience, I'm seeing that and I'm learning, right? And this was a really dramatic experience, but I do like watching project vlogs for this reason. And this is the like, I need to watch human beings behave so I know how to behave, right? And so if you're not autistic, you're gonna be like, this is crazy, right? I will watch people do things and be like, oh, yes, that is the way that people react to things. That's good. I'm gonna write that down in a next note in my head, and I'm gonna file that away under reactions to things, right? When people experience setbacks, the way that different people experience setbacks is useful information to me. And I understand that social media is not real life. I'm not saying it's real life, but I will also say that the knitting world is not that glitzy, glamorous. Like, I feel like most of us are pretty real on here. And I see people cry, and I see people like really, really sad. And it helps to know that, yeah, actually it's okay to be really sad and to be really helpless and to feel really overwhelmed. And they might feel really down for a period of time, and then you'll see them kind of in the rest of the video go through it, or like by nature of them living on YouTube and like existing, and life continues and it's not that big of a deal. And every time I see that happen to someone else, it helps my brain calm down and understand that I can also have that reaction. I can have a big reaction, I can feel the way that I feel, and I can move on, and things can be okay. And both are going to exist simultaneously. And when I see other people do it, I get to practice doing it. I get to see myself in that position, and it helps. You know, so I think this is more about the internet knitting world than it is knitting the physical act. But I do think that also is like a tremendous aid in my emotional regulation over time, and specifically my executive function and expectation management. I also think generally, okay, I wrote pattern systems and precise language and instructions help with strict rule-based thinking. Yeah, I just think like it's a gritty hobby that has like a lot of instructions. It just is what it is. I don't really think that there's anything more to say besides knitting is the right kind of fussy, and you can position yourself anywhere along the spectrum from like vibe based only to I want everything written out in binary code, right? And people have their feelings, but I will say that as someone who likes a pattern, and I like reading things literally, and I like having a set of instructions, and I like having a rule to follow, and then within those rules I can be creative a little bit, but I don't have to be too creative. I can just be creative enough. I think that is the exact sweet spot for my brain, and I think it's also the sweet spot for a few other people's brains. I remember what Kate Makes did an episode where she was like, I always wonder if people are coming from knitting from the technical mathy side and they get to practice their art skills, or if they're coming from the artistic side and they practice their math skills. And for me, I was like, oh my God, I'm coming from the artsy side and I'm practicing my math skills. But at the same time, when I read, I really need the math stuff to guide me, because I cannot just like go by vibes and be like, well, I want the armhole to be a little bit longer, and I feel like I should just be able to increase it like this and get it to be like the right size, right? I see people do that. And it's so funny because like I identify very strongly as an artist first. And then I think people in my life look at me and they think that I'm artist first, but the way that my brain works, I think, is probably closer to logic first, right? Like I think my brain works very closely to computer programming language, or even the language of math. And I think for that reason, it works really well for my particular flavor of dog, which is like my special interest is art and visuals. But I would say, broadly speaking, it is art, that's the special interest. And then the language that we're using, the software we're using is math and precise language and science. And it just melds together in a very, very beautiful way. And what is even more beautiful is I feel like no matter which way you lean, if you're like, I want more vibes, I'm gonna go off of just like shape and drape and color and texture, and I can be creative and I can play with stuff and I can break the rules, you can do that. And as long as you know how to like course correct, it is a beautiful, tactile, wonderful, creative world for you out there just to like go by vibes and color and shape and texture. And if you want to know the hows and whys, the grit and the science and the chemistry and the molecular composition of how like things are woven, and like when you talk about grist and worsted versus woolen weight, and like why is it this way and how are the fibers arranged and like how does the molecular composition of these fibers look, I love that stuff and I think it's amazing. And you can come over this way and then like, I don't know anything about color, right? It works in both directions. I think it's really, really fantastic. And my brain right now, just explaining it, is lighting on fire because there is just so much to sink your teeth into. And there is as much on both sides as you care to enjoy, right? It's a buffet. And if you only want to sit to your little section of the buffet, that's like totally chill and cool. And there will be lots of wonderful, delicious things for you. If you want to see that entire buffet of like all the little international foods and all the different stuff, you have plenty of options. And there are instructors and teachers and inspiration and role models like the world over, like 3 times the world over. It's amazing. And it just, it feels like it's a playground for me where things are written exactly the way I want them to be written. And there is exactly as much wiggle room as I would like there to be. And if I want to adjust at any time, I feel like I am empowered to adjust the way I see fit, which is great. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about politics and identity, which is like, I think 2 different things. The first thing that I want to say is this is a little bit faster, which is that I think autism oftentimes presents itself as either highly compliant, where you are masking yourself to fit into society, or you are unabashedly yourself. And obviously there's everything in the middle, but like you can be high masking or low masking. And I think knitting is, again, one of those things where like, I feel like you are encouraged to be low masking, or like, maybe this is just my impression, but I think we as a hobby are already so like niche and kind of particular that there's not a great social pressure to like fit in. And maybe there is, right? And maybe this is me missing the social cues, but I do feel like as it is already, vis-a-vis the normal crowd, we are kind of doing like a niche, not particularly sexy hobby that is not very susceptible to fast-paced commercialized trends, right? Like, of course, there are trends in our world the way that there are trends in any biological niche, right? Like in any niche, there's going to be trends. But I do feel like our niches are maybe more conceptual and less commercial. Like you can't buy as much to the great volume that you could in other, you know, consumerist hobbies. In other hobbies, especially hobbies that are targeted towards women, right? Which is like, I'm going to make a grand sweeping assumption, and I think this is mostly true based on my demographics and also like what I see. The vast majority of fiber artists are women and girls. And it's not lost on me that I do think that a lot of female interests are largely marketable and consumable hobbies, right? And so I understand that identity politics is like a difficult thing to get into, and like when you let your identity become the whole thing and like you have this false sense of like conflating the 2 things. This is not to say that like we're gonna get into this whole thing, but I do think knitting is a very safe venue for you to feel like you can be yourself, because there's not as many external pressures to be something that you're not. Like there's just not enough money, again, to be compelling as a social force or a market force to push people in any single box. Like all kinds of stuff is trending all the time. I don't necessarily feel like it's like in any one particular direction. Like there's stuff for lots of different ages and fashion styles, and like sure, things trend in a general sense that like culture has trends, but it doesn't feel like every year there's like, okay, now we're doing coquette, and now we're doing minimalism, and after minimalism we're doing French Parisian chic, and then after French Parisian chic we're gonna go straight into high fashion and we're gonna do haute couture only. It just feels like we are pretty happy being who we are and liking what we like and making alterations as we see fit, and wearing colors that we like regardless of what's trending, and knitting the stuff that comes out if we like it, and if not, we have a whole backlog of stuff. People just seem to be very sovereign in their decision making, and I don't know if this is just I'm on knitting YouTube and I'm watching a lot of knitters on knitting YouTube, and like people that I watch seem to know what they like. And I actually really enjoy the level of diversity that I see on my feed, which is that I don't actually follow that many people who look and have taste like me. Sure, there might be like 1 or 2, but actually a lot of knitting content creators I watch are like 45-year-old women in like the Midwestern US, or even like 50-year-old women in Europe somewhere who are like winding down and like they're retired, but they have a lot of time, and so they make YouTube videos. And I knit in a lot of knit groups, and my knit groups are like of various shapes, denominations, colors, like whatever, right? Like people are different, and I don't see all that much homogeneity. Like I don't. Like it's like, I think the internet definitely puts people in a bubble, and even that bubble is fairly diverse. And I don't know if I've just done like a bang up job like curating my feed to be very diverse, but lots of different bodies, lots of different preferences. No one is out here apologizing for not following trends. And of course, there will always be a percentage of like 27-year-old women who are being able to document and deliver trends in a very precise journalistic way. But like by and far, the vast majority of knitters that I'm watching are doing stuff like at the speed of their own drum, which is amazing, and I love that. And then in terms of politics, I think knitting gives us a very good sense of control. There's a locus of control, and I don't necessarily mean that like knitting is the be all end all of like our political action, because that is not true. But I do think that there is also something to be said about having a say in your consumerism and using your knitting to make a political promise, if only to yourself and maybe like the several dollars that you spend on it, right? We are not going to compete with large-scale corporations. So knitting as a personal hobby is not going to replace actual civic action. Like, I understand this, and I also like am not trying to put out any ideas that like by you knitting from like a small batch farmer, like you are presenting the world with like a political ideology that is radical and groundbreaking. No, but I do think that it's like the minimum amount of sovereignty that we have, and that feels good to be like, I'm making a choice with my dollar, right? I'm making a choice that I don't want to do doom scrolling. I'm making a choice that I don't want to support companies that make large political donations to super PACs and stuff that I don't agree with. I am going to be knitting with yarn that is local to my country or to my region, using, I don't know, sheep breeds that are like about to be extinct, but like a particular, you know, closed practice of breeding is going to keep them alive. We have so many niche opportunities in this world and in this space to support a thing that we care about. And of course, if you can't, that's fine. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, but I am saying for the people who do feel like they want to have a sense of control. And I think a lot of this is a sense of control, and a lot of it is going to be virtue signaling, if you want to call it that, right? There is really only so much we can do at the end of the day, but I do think it is important to feel like you're standing for something, and it's important for your actions to be in line with your moral beliefs. And I think with autism, and with the really, really strong sense of right and wrong, and with the rigid moral thinking where like moral consistency has to be extremely high all the way through, that is the thing that you'll see, where people are very, very, very fixated on morality. They're very fixated on things being right and wrong and correct. And if you are not correct here, you have to like redo the whole thing, and like it can keep people up at night. And like I am included in this, where it just morality can sometimes be like the only thing I think about for an entire day. And if something goes wrong, or I'm learning something about like bad news when it comes to morals, it can derail like an entire week, and it can just throw me into a very, very, very dark place, right? And so having a sense of control and having so much transparency, or like feeling like I have agency here, is really useful. There are a lot of industries where there's a lot less transparency. And I'm not saying that the transparency is like all that reputable, but it's at least better than a lot of other stuff that I've done, right? Watercolors, I don't know where those pigments come from. Like, I just don't. And like, I might be able to look into some of it. But realistically, I do think those are, again, bigger industry players where it is going to be harder and harder for you to find more information. Whereas when it comes to yarn and wool, for whatever reason, I just feel like by comparison, those raw materials, we can find more information about this than that. I don't know why, but I do think it helps in terms of understanding your political alignment and feeling like your moral alignment and your actions and like what you spend your money and your free time doing can be more aligned. And this goes for people I disagree with too, right? Like, this is not necessarily to say that you need to be one way or another. I think you could be like a far right fascist knitter. We know we have them, and you might have autism, and you might be like, that's really important for me to like maintain my logical consistency. And you might, for example, start a magazine, or, you know, like share those beliefs somewhere prevalent, and that would be important to you, for example, right? But I will say that that is an example of something where like your sense of rigid thinking, for right or wrong, can inform your sense of self. And when you are able to back up that sense of self with your actions, it can feel more internally consistent. And for me, knitting is one where I feel I have a higher than average understanding of where things are coming from and where they're going and where they sit on my morality scale compared to something else, like where I buy my cosmetics from, or where my paper pulp comes from, or even like the food that I eat. Like, to some degree, like I can do some research, but like it's more dubious. And for this, for whatever reason, politics, transparency, a little bit more clear. I'll also say the knitting community has been fantastic because it's given me structured socialization time. Yay, this is great. And also on top of that, I will say the structured socialization time has been very diverse and very inclusive. And that's fantastic. I can't think of another hobby, like I'm sure people have them, but there are not a lot of hobbies that can be done with so many different age groups, so many different cognitive levels, so many different body types, and there's no size limitation because like you can just like knit your own stuff. It can happen all over the world because there's so many different materials, and the actual startup cost to actually knit is not that high, and you can learn the skill with very little. You can teach it to children, elderly people can do it. If you have limited mobility, you can do it. You don't need to have like that much endurance. You know, it's just, it seems to be, I mean, obviously there will be more inclusive things in this world, but I will say it's surprisingly diverse, this space, and I really enjoy that. And I also think that having a space to have a shared common interest has obviously made conversation a lot easier, right? So if you have an autistic friend or you know an autistic person, you might realize that the only thing they want to freaking talk about is their special interest, right? And part of that lack of social awareness or the lack of social skills, and I will say that again because it's a diagnostic criterion, those things are difficult to deal with, and they're difficult on our end too. But when you have a little bit of that social lubrication, you have the thing to talk about, it then opens the door to practicing other types of like conversation, right? It just makes it a little bit easier to create the safe space to small talk, to practice those skills, to start also like feeling comfortable engaging at the level that I want. So like knit circles, usually you have like a group of people and like you might talk as little or as much as you want, but it's really important to me to have those spaces be available, right? Because sometimes just being seen is important, right? Think about all those community structures where like people do stuff and they're not necessarily friends, but because you have a community that is aware of your existence, when you are not there, people are able to do wellness checks or people are able to inquire, and like there's a lot of transfer of information between different groups, and that is really hard to get if you don't have a social circle. And for me, I can tell you right now, I would be in a much, much worse mental state after having left a marriage and like having my entire world like changed upside down and like moving different towns. And like if I didn't have social knitting circles that were accepting of me, if I didn't have this YouTube channel, everything would be very, very, very different for me. And it would feel pretty miserable. And a lot of the friends that I have now and a lot of the joy and the pride as a person that I have comes from all those connections that I made through knitting. Not that knitting is my entire life and the only thing that I do, but that knitting has opened many doors and facilitated a lot of growth. It's facilitated a lot of connections that are now really integral and important to my mental health and my well-being and my happiness. And I hope that I can also like pass it on to other people. And like when I go to knit group, I hope they enjoy my presence just as much. And I hope that, you know, it's mutually beneficial, which I think it is. But I do think the fact that we have these spaces and the fact that we are working really hard to build them when corporations and, you know, like towns we live in and everything, it's not always easy to community build. And I think we as little pockets and groups like are doing our best. I think that's really cute, and it's heartwarming to see us, you know, reaching out to each other and trying to make sure that we have support when we need it. I think that's my whole list. I want to say again at the end of this video that you know, this is just a love letter to knitting for me and my autism, because it just has been so important for my mental health. Again, like this is the like wouldn't be here if I didn't have this. To me, it's like equal parts regulation tool and craft, or equal parts regulation and art. And you could also say that deep physical, emotional connection to this thing that is so important to my mental and physical health, as well as my sense of belonging and safety and trust and hope for the world, is spiritual. It's like so deeply critical to who I am as a person and how I move through the world. And again, that special interest being art broadly, but like having a taste for beauty, having a taste for arts and craftsmanship and for handiwork and for folk art and for traditions of history that have been passed down, you know, usually matrilinearly. I think that in itself is enough to like make me emotional, right? It can be very, very, very significant for people in a way that others may not understand, and that's fine. There are a lot of different things that make it very autism friendly. And in this month of autism awareness, I just wanted to celebrate knitting as a wonderful, viable option, as a venture, as a thing that you can do if you haven't tried it already, and you are on the spectrum, or you just feel like anything that I mentioned here might help you, please do. I cannot advocate enough, right, for its work. It maps perfectly with the pattern recognition and the need for repetition seeking, for grounding, for safety, for sensory regulation, for executive skills, stimming, controlled and precise language systems, a method of socialization, a way to self-actualize your identity, a way to learn difficult life lessons about failure, a way to connect with history and anthropology and diversity, and to learn to advocate in a political sense that is good for you and safe for you. All of that has been really meaningful, and I hope this was interesting, and I hope that it was at the very least entertaining and you were able to see a little bit more into my mind. I'm so curious to know if you are still watching, the kind of person who you are. So if you are someone who is holistic, that is you are not autistic, and you watch this video, I would love to know like what you gained from this. Was it interesting? Did it remind you of anyone? Do you relate to some of these things too? And if so, which ones are they? And if you don't relate, which ones are you like fascinated by? And if you are autistic, please sound off in the comments below. I just know that we are there, right? Because I get comments here and there. And obviously if you don't want to like out yourself, like that's fine. Just know that I'm excited to hear your story. And if you want to DM me, like whatever, that'll be sweet too. But again, like I didn't seek to be the person to make this video. I'm just surprised that no one else did. And because no one else did, I felt like I wanted to put my 2 cents in there. And if it's not complete, it is not going to be complete, right? Because this is just me. And this is just what I came up with during the workday today. But I would love to know what you guys do, right? There are other, like my stash video got a ton of comments, and I got so many wonderful comments from people who were sharing perspectives that I did not have at all, right? Because it was just not my lived experience. I would love to hear anyone else's feedback and whether or not they have literally anything to contribute to the conversation, because I'm sure there is. And I learn a lot from my comments, so I am always grateful for anyone who leaves them. While you are here, we have a hype button down in the little like feed here. Click it if you want, because it's a cool feature and it pushes videos out to the feed a little bit more. And if this is like not the first video that you've watched from me and you haven't subscribed yet, I would love it if you did. I normally wouldn't, but yeah, if you don't, it's like literally discrimination. No, I'm kidding. But like, I've noticed that recently my channel has gotten a lot more views than historically, and for that reason I think a lot of y'all are not subscribed. And if you like what I do here on the feed, you know, I would love to have you come back. I upload weekly pretty much, and I never put this at the top of the video because I just feel like you wouldn't know if you want to subscribe at the top of the video. So at the end of the video, I'm happy to pander, right? So at the end of the video, I'm going to panhandle, I'm going to ask for your likes and your hypes and your shares and all that. It really means the world to me. But most importantly, I would love to hear your actual feedback, your comments, your lived experience. All of that is so important to me, and I look forward to reading those comments every minute of every day. It's mentally unwell of me. But thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!